Well, look, let's turn our attention to what's happening still at COP26. So the Leaders Summit has now ended. Hooray, everybody. Although it goes on for 2 weeks, the leaders have now all left Glasgow or leaving later today. And therefore, hopefully a lot less focus going on it. We know that various things have been announced. We had the deforestation commitment yesterday. We had various announcements from India in terms of hitting net zero by 2070. Methane gas emissions pledged to cut by 30% by 90 countries, not including China, a major emitter of methane. That's on the front page of some newspapers today. But crucially, we're going to be hearing in the next hour from Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who's going to announce new Treasury rules whereby most big UK firms and financial institutions will be forced to show how they intend to hit climate change targets. By 2023, they'll have to set out detailed plans in public for how they will move to a low carbon future in line with the net zero target. And the plans have to be submitted to an expert panel. We don't know who's on that panel to ensure they're not just spin. However, those commitments will not be mandatory. Well, let's talk about all of this with Tom Burke. He's the co-founding director and chairman of E3G. They're an independent European climate change think tank. Good morning to you, Tom.
Morning, Julia.
Thanks very much for joining us. First of all, before we get into the nitty-gritty of this particular announcements from Rishi Sunak, what do you make overall of what the COP26 summit has achieved, if anything at all?
Oh, it certainly achieved something. It's just not achieved enough. What I make of it is I think we're continuing to turn the corner we started turning in Paris, where we're moving from a policy, if you like, a problem where we're trying to constrain things to one in which we're increasingly trying to take the opportunities of solving the problem. And I think that's a lot of what we've been hearing out of the Prime Minister, out of the other heads of government, and what I suspect we're now about to hear from the Chancellor is people are seeing that the opportunities of solving the problem of climate change are now increasingly a more important focus for progress.
Well, this is it. I mean, so much of the focus has been on stopping people doing things, charging people more money. We're told, meat taxes, carbon taxes, punishing people for doing things, making things illegal, as opposed to looking for technological innovations and changes, which people will be quite happy to follow because they're quite happy to do green things as long as it doesn't cost them any more. And often if they could be cheaper, as we're told these things will be, then they'll happily do it. But we haven't heard very much of that in the last few days.
You can't get new technologies without paying for them, so people are going to have to pay for them. The question is whether paying for them is a better deal than actually letting the problem continue and ending up paying to restore your house after it's been flooded. So, I mean, there's no issue about the fact that something has to be paid for. A real issue about who does the paying, balance of payment between all of us and some of us. I think there are real issues about that, but we're certainly going to have to be paying things for the things we want to solve the problem. The real problem is that more people are much more incentivized to pursue opportunities than they are to observe constraints. And so I think you're right about that. In a sense, people see a better, brighter, safer, more secure future, then they're willing to pay for it, as indeed they always have been.
Yeah, well, indeed. Well, let's talk about the specifics of what Rishi Sunak's going to announce today. We spoke to a guest earlier who was pointing out we're looking at a triple hit for British people from firms being forced to basically not being able to get bank funding for a lot of the things that they do because if they don't have the right sort of net zero green credentials, that will cause higher energy prices for us, sacrificing investment returns. Effectively, we're going to see our pensions pot is going to be diminished, and of course we're going to see higher prices, and we're going to be paying taxes to subsidize developing world to have more expensive renewable energy instead of cheaper fossil fuels. We're going to face a really big hit on our lives, aren't we?
Well, that's a very gloomy prognosis for the future.
It's an accurate one, though, isn't it?
If we do sensible policies, actually, no, it's particularly gloomy. Governments can do really dumb things that make those costs unbearable. Quite right about that. They can also do smart things that actually make the transition not only in the short term less costly, but in the longer term actually make it beneficial to people's, particularly households' incomes. So it's a question of what kind of government policies you have that mobilize those financial resources behind them. Bad policies will get you bad results. That's absolutely right.
Well, yeah, that I think we'll definitely agree on that. I'm just very concerned that firms, going about their daily business are going to be forced to show how they're going to hit climate targets. Not sure it's even relevant for most of their customers, and maybe not for their investors and shareholders either. They're going to have to submit their plans in public and submit them to an expert panel. But they're not going to be mandatory commitments. So anyone can say, "Oh, I'm going to net zero, tomorrow by 100%. I'm cutting everything. It's all going to be fine." And they can say that and then just not do it. I mean, these things are utterly pointless, aren't they?
No, they're not pointless. And I think you're confusing the idea that somehow this is a more responsible moral behavior on the part of companies with what's actually driving this, driven incidentally by central bankers, not even driven by politicians, which is that climate change is a real threat to macroeconomic stability and therefore a big risk to prosperity everywhere. And the fact is that if companies don't incorporate that risk into their plans, then they won't succeed in delivering the goods and won't succeed in delivering revenue.
Well, in that case, you wouldn't have to have new rules about it. If it was vital for companies to succeed, they would do it anyway, and the ones that don't will fail.
Take the logic of that. We get rid of all the rules of the whole of the PRA and the Financial Conduct Authority and all the other rules. The fact is that capital doesn't always do what it's supposed to do and its best interest to do, and quite often cheats its customers. So you do have to have rules, and these are good rules that will help make sure that business takes on board the real risk of climate change.
Oh, I don't think that the business and certainly banks do, act in the interests of their customers. They don't often act in the interests of themselves. And if it is the case that it's going green for them makes them more money, they'll do it. But this is my concern, is that actually we are going to look at people making less money. And it's all very well. I'm not that bothered, as we were discussing earlier, a millionaire or a billionaire having a little less money back from their investments. But I am worried about millions of people who've got small private pensions, which they're going to rely on for, living on for 30 years after they retire, not actually getting the returns that they deserve. And that is going to hit people's pensions.
You're absolutely right about that. And that's all the more important that the pension fund industry and the insurance fund industry, which covers much of the same sort of problems for people, actually gets on with the job of spreading its risk and doesn't concentrate on easy punts into fossil fuels, which have delivered very, very good revenue.
Wait a minute, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Tom. That doesn't make sense at all. If I would like my pension fund to be in the best possible profit-making industries and businesses so they can make me the most money.
Yeah, well, you would also like your house not to be flooded. You would also like your food prices not to go up. You'd not like to live in a world which its security was being stable by climate change. So there are lots of things that people would like to have. The question is, how do you balance out all those different lights?
Well, except, of course, when it comes to energy prices and instability, I think that those are rather more likely to come about by the focus on climate change as opposed to other more important pressing measures which are genuinely affecting people's lives right now. But there we are.
Julia, the idea that climate change isn't genuinely affecting people's lives now simply is just wrong. It's affecting people's lives in this country. It's affecting people's lives all over the world right now.
How?
How? By the extreme weather events that we've seen.
No, I'm sorry. The IPCC has not said that. They have not even got high confidence for the belief that more extreme weather events are as a result of climate change.
I'm sorry, I think you're looking at an older version of the report. And anyway, you're clearly not looking at what's going on your own television sets, because you can see the examples. Attribution science is now very confident, and you see every time those sort of events are published, people can tell you what.
Jon Snow from Channel 4 blamed a tree falling on the train line on his rail journey up to Glasgow. He blamed that on climate change. We have extreme weather. We occasionally have very extreme weather events. We've had a heat wave. And the UN Meteorological Office giving a report on that. It's on the front page of The Guardian today, saying this is going to become far more likely. However, a number of the reports that we've seen into all this have suggested actually, when it comes to the number of extreme weather events and the severity of those extreme weather events, that actually globally we are not seeing an increase.
I'm sorry, Julie, you're just wrong about that. You're simply wrong on the data. I don't know who your researchers are, but my guess is you should fire them because they're giving you the wrong information. And you can see that what's more, the public knows what's going on. You can take a opinion poll anywhere you like in the world and find growing anxiety about what's
Oh,
happening.
no, that's because, no, 24 hours a day, Tom, you have rolling pictures of absolute disasters, and you're constantly told it's all due to climate change, as opposed to, for instance, people not dealing with forests properly, not dredging rivers, not dealing with the basic infrastructure of our countries. Then of course people are going to think that we're all going to hell in a handcart. Most people now, if you watch daily television and BBC website, Sky News, ITV, you would basically, and the Guardian and the Times, you would basically think that we were going to either all drown tomorrow or all burn up in a fireball tomorrow. But that's simply not true.
Well, sorry, of course it's not true. Nobody's saying that. That's your impression of what you.
We've got people who are at the climate summit saying, we're all going to die if we don't deal with this in 10 years' time.
No, sorry, Julia. You are exaggerating. You're doing exactly what you're attacking the people for doing, which is exaggerating your point. And that's a normal media stunt. We're all quite used to it. Make allowance for it.
No, we've got the protesters, many of the people, the Greta Thunbergs who interviewed, she makes outlandish, completely unscientifically based statements all the time. And yet she's given a hearing by a lot of these people.
Well, she's entitled to her voice, just like you're entitled to yours. We worry, but I think your opinions are pretty well ill-informed. I don't worry about that. You're perfectly entitled to make them, and I'm going to debate them with you. But she's entitled to make her opinions felt.
Given that we have seen decades now, not just years, but decades of doom, and we've had hundreds of years. You go back to Thomas Malthus, of predictions of absolute disaster and devastation for the planet, whether it was global freezing, global warming, extreme weather, all of these issues, and yet we have very little evidence that this is going to be the disaster, the crisis, the catastrophe, the existentially damaging event that many on the green eco side claim. Do you think it's any wonder that a lot of people, frankly, don't take this seriously?
Yeah, but I don't think you're right about that. And I think the people who say that it's an existential threat are central bankers. I think by and large, if you think we should stop listening to central bankers, you want to live in a pretty chaotic world. They're not the kind of people who just get wound up by media headlines. And if you think the public has been misled by exaggeration in the headlines, the people to blame are the editors of the media, not the public.
Well, yeah, I do blame them. I do. Tom Burke, co-founding director and chairman of E3G, an independent European climate change think tank. Thank you very much indeed for discussing my ill-informed views with me.